So we're continuing with talking about doubt, and I wanted to describe a little bit about working with it. And I thought Venerable described it so well in her book about how the mind is just kind of racing and just all these conceptions going on. There's a lot of energy in the mind and a lot of confusion, really. And she talks about first settling the mind down. And she mentioned doing breathing meditation, but something to stabilize the mind so that you can have more clarity. And then you actually have to define to yourself really what your doubts are about. But that isn't how it often starts, because what's going on in the mind, it all feels so real. It's just like, this is just how it is, and you're buying in, believing everything, So, and the mind is just, I don't know, it's not a very workable mind. So you have to, if the mind is kind of very full racing like that, you have to get it calm, and then with more calmness there's more clarity, and then you can start to see what's going on. And then they say that you have to kind of work out your questions, so you have to identify really what your questions are, and that's the process where you're really moving in a good direction, because by then, instead of because doubt can be real strong, and Venerable makes it real clear, you just can't say go away. It's not going to work. You can't just, when something is strong like that, you have to work with it. And so getting to the place where you can actually then turn and look and find out really what are the questions you're having. And I find sometimes, like with things like this, that or even with, I remember Venerable asking me a number of times something, well, what are you unhappy about? Like sometimes I'll just be unhappy and I don't even know. It's like, well, how do you fix that? You have to really kind of define these things a little bit, see what's really going on. And when you start asking yourself those questions, sometimes, some of these moods and things like that, they're kind of inconsequential, and you don't have to allow them to take over your mind. So I think recognizing that although our minds are not fully under our control and we get overwhelmed, being able to recognize that that's happening right there, you're kind of breaking into it with this kind of awareness that is going to help you to then really work towards eliminating those kinds of thinking, because it's just thoughts and we think it's also real. So I think that's very important to understand. So that's a part that really has a lot to do with identifying it as an afflicted state of mind. Right? Seeing the faults of it, then putting these spies of mindfulness and vigilance or introspective awareness, so you can say, yeah, that is doubt, and here it is arising. And, just the labeling of it can be helpful, because then you don't have to you see my letters? You don't have to get under the sway of it so much. So another thing that I read and I find helpful is, it's not something that maybe we always think about, but it's got too many pages here. Here it is actually training ourselves to have more faith. And there's a sutra that says, faith is the prerequisite of all good qualities, a procreator of them, like a mother who then protects and increases them. It clears away doubts, frees you from the four rivers of ignorance, attachment, craving, and wrong views, and establishes you in the prosperous city of happiness and goodness. Faith cuts through gloom and clarifies the mind. It eliminates pride and is the root of respect. It is a jewel and a treasure. Like hands, it is the basis of gathering virtue. It is the best of feet for going to liberation. And this is really similar to something that Nagarjuna said, where these two things are indispensable, faith and wisdom, and you have to have both. Of course, wisdom is more important in a way in terms of freeing us, but without faith, you won't make effort. And so when we talk about faith from a Buddhist context, we're actually talking about faith that's based on reason. And so that then leads us to, especially when working with doubt, is we have to actually educate ourselves, study, reflect, contemplate and then meditate upon things. And the last thing that I want to mention about this is another thing that I read from Lama Tsongkhapa that I found helpful. I think it's because sometimes what comes up for me in particular that I didn't identify it as such as things related to being raised Catholic, where on an emotional level, I'm kind of still, part of me is looking to the Buddha and the Buddhist practices in the way I would have looked at Jesus or God. There's still that element there that happens emotionally, and when I recognize that, it's really takes all my power away, and it's not a good place, but I haven't always been quick to understand that. And so then you do it with the teacher, and you do it with other things. You kind of emotionally take this, like when you're a child and you pray, and you want to be saved. Please come and save me, because this is unbearable. And I'm too small and can't do anything. It's like, it's so powerless. And so when I read this from Lama Tsongkhapa, I thought, yeah, this is helpful. He said, therefore, and has to do with this process of studying and all that. Therefore, first study with someone what you intend to practice, and come to know it secondhand. So that's like, we receive the teachings from the teachers, indispensable, but that is a second-hand way of knowing something. Next, use scripture and reasoning to properly reflect on the meaning of what you have studied and come to know it firsthand. Yeah, we have to know these things for ourselves. It won't really work in the midst of a lot of internal turmoil for these things from the outside to come in. We have to heal our own minds. Once you determine the meaning of what you originally intended to practice with this kind of study and reflection, and you have no doubts, meaning you have to really work through these things. It's not, this is the job. Think through things through and ask questions and really get to some clarity and find out what, maybe is hanging you up, and how you're going to let that sit. Even that's something that our minds are obscured. We can't see everything that the Buddha taught, and some things are very hidden, extremely hidden phenomena. And so we have to have a place to rest with that in our practice and not let these things derail us. So we have to then, once we get to a place where we aren't having doubts, then we familiarize ourselves with these things repeatedly, and this is what we're doing in meditation. So that's, important to understand kind of the process, I think. So the very last thing I will leave you with is something from, there were some really helpful things from Atisha. I just have to find him. So Atisha was quite aware that all day long we're dealing with our crazy minds. And so when he would run into somebody, he would often say, and how has your mind been? It was something to that effect. I wish I could find the exact words. Oh, jeez. Didn't edit this enough, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, there it is, finally. Okay, furthermore, no matter how many times the great elder Atisha met someone in a day, so he'd do this repeatedly, he'd always ask, meanwhile, have you had a good mind? He wasn't expecting, it's just this reality check. All day long we have to deal with our afflictions. So it's kind of like a statement of saying, well, are you working with it, or are you just letting them override you? And that was like the big point, because, there's so many great inspiring stories from Lama Tsongkhapa and the great treatise about how, like there's one guy who, I think it was a student of Potoa, he said something like, even when I'm under the afflictions, I can still grit my teeth below them. And then this teacher says to him, essentially, you're going to make it with that, because that's going to work. It's this thing of not succumbing and not kind of giving in. Yeah, we fall down a lot, and we have to get ourselves back up, but we sometimes actually give in to things too. And so this is that kind of, even within all of that's going on within our minds, this, gritting your teeth and making effort against them. As long as we do that and we have the teachings straight in our minds and work to do that, then there's no doubt that we'll continue to make progress. So slowly, slowly.